I'd like to acknowledge again this morning that we are holding this event on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. We're thankful for this opportunity. This event is organized by the GPA team and also the DLC. And yeah, I'd like to just thank our DLC co-organizers, the team as well, for everything that's gone in behind the scenes. All right, without further ado, I'll hand over to Kedrick, who's going to introduce today's keynote.
Thank you to Ashley for doing such an exceptional job as an embassy. It's an important task. It always either makes or breaks what follows, of course. And you're doing spectacularly. So I was just given the honor here of introducing somebody that I think is going to be more and more important as we go forward in the world of academic publishing and scholarship. I know this has been a topic for the department, one of real concern. I think for anybody who's working in academia now, and I think Dr. Jason Schmitt, as you can see, Chair of Communication and Media at Clarkson University in New York, has been doing some, I think, exceptionally important work in putting together the state of the affairs of the publishing industry right now. We know that it's been a shrinking and monopolizing scenario with just a few very large publishers making an exceptional amount of money on the backs and labor of scholarly workers, and at the same time preventing that knowledge, which we always talk about in terms of the need for mobilization, preventing that from getting into the hands of the people who could most benefit from our work. I think we, in creating this kind of research, often do so with the thought of people in communities and living their daily lives as being the most hopeful direct beneficiaries of the kind of work that we do, and yet it is priced outside of what they can access. So even if they did have the motivation to look into and discover what scholarship can offer them and whatever kinds of questions and needs they have, they're prevented from doing so, not only by the difficulty of accessing that from a literacy point of view, but from a pure, strict financial point of view. It is just too expensive, and I'm sure you all have published things which, to buy a copy back from the same publisher, would cost you a day's pay. So I won't take up too much time, just to say that Jason is an absolutely fascinating person. I want to say that we will get to watch Paywall, the movie version of the talk, this afternoon with fresh hot popcorn, which you gotta have for a movie. And to say that I think just in keeping with Jason's whole stance and political movement that he's taking against this act of paywalling our work, the actual movie itself is free. Don't go watch it before this afternoon, but it's always a sign of putting your mouth where your words are, that you are willing to share something which has now, Jason, you've been touring this all over. I know a lot of universities, the UC area have also taken it up, but all sorts of top flight institutions in the US and around the world have been playing this for graduate students, faculty, and what have you, anybody involved in the industry. So I think this work is magnificent, and it's also wonderful to get to meet you. So let's give a warm welcome to
So I mic myself up because I prefer to be too loud rather than too quiet. And also I know audio quality for video cameras, and if I'm recording this, okay, this might be a little touch loud, but all right. Sorry. Awesome. That's probably good. So first of all, Kedrick, thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to thank the LLED Conference for bringing me here. It's been an opportunity that it's so great to have these opportunities. This is a little too much. Maybe I can go loud, but yeah. And it was so great last night sharing food with so many of you that are up and coming graduate students. Still loud. I'm gonna kill it. I'm pretty loud myself. Think? I'll be good. As we're going through education, we're primed to think about higher education in a certain capacity. I always start all of my university classes, which have some of the best students like you have, that are sitting there feverishly writing notes, undergrad students, and I always say to them, well, isn't that nice that you look around and you identify with the system and you feel like you fit in? And they think it's just normal to be a 19-year-old jotting notes down feverishly and that this is just like status quo life. And I say to them, isn't that nice that we have this opportunity where you feel really acclimated as a college student? You're talking about the pros and cons of your classes. But think of the it's every single class I ever teach. Think of the hundreds or thousands of students that can't have their butts in these seats. That because of social or socioeconomic or political forces are keeping them out of these seats. And they always nod, and I think we need to use this higher education to support those that are voiceless. And I think that's something that as I talk to universities of kind of quite a few, I mean everybody nods, everybody agrees that higher education A has that as kind of an undercurrent, and B, higher education is powerful regardless of the cost. Yes, college is increasingly expensive, and yes, there's all sorts of problematic budgetary constraints at every university practically in the world. But still, we know that there's the virtue of an informed populace, and understanding that we have to look out for those that are less fortunate. That kind of comes as a synonymous string to this. And so I think I brought that with me as I started kind of crafting an idea that I never knew would be this project. But I've crafted a lot of ideas in my educational journey because I had to identify and differentiate myself as an academic. Last night, as we were sitting there kind of, sharing bread over at Kedrick's, a lot of you are in those same moments right now of trying to figure out what's your academic journey going to look like? And where is that going to take you? This isn't about this film. This is about using media and digital literacy for an advantage. Using it for good, too, right? And my academic career was slightly disillusioned. I got my PhD, and I expected all these great job offers, and it was 2008. Nothing really started to really materialize. I was teaching 8 courses a semester as an adjunct. And I was really kind of in this perpetual system of really trying to figure out, well, what's my contribution to higher education going to be? And I didn't know, but I knew that I needed to do something because I was kind of a cog in a wheel that I was kind of powerless. And I knew I wanted to, again, stand out for people that are less powerful. And so I thought, where's something that I can get traction as an academic, in addition to my scholarly output and my dissertation, trying to maybe take that into publications. I thought, well, I'm going to take this and I'm going to start writing more. I'm going to start writing to a popular audience. That was when Huffington Post was coming out. And so I started interviewing people, not in the academic scope, but again, in companies as well, but again, towards like this empowerment, synergy, creative, like B Corp movements where companies are trying to do better than worse. And I started to get a little traction on that. And I started to get a little bit of kind of a different voice than just my academic voice. It didn't dilute my academic pedigree, but it sort of gave me something that kind of coexisted with my academic path. And that really was a force that really stayed with me through my higher education journey, which, like your higher education journey, is going to probably be a lot more like a pinball machine, where you hit the ball and it goes up and goes around and it hits that rubber band and it shoots over here and it hits something times 1,000. We don't know where the journey is taking us. I always tell my class, also on that first day, to know that they need to do one thing every day to get to their 5-year goal. What do you want to do in 5 years? I tell my students, what's that look like? Vividly kind of think about that. And if you're not doing one thing, it can take a minute every day to get you to that 5-year kind of journey, then again, you're just kind of in that feedback loop where I found myself for many years. So that has nothing to do with this project, but I think it's a sentiment that sort of, gave me something to stand upon to really evaluate academics, maybe from a Google map negative macro zoom as opposed to a plus micro zoom. So as a journalist, now I'm starting to write more and getting a little bit of following online and writing about corporate creativity and writing about profit margins and kind of synergistic opportunities in Global South. And I was the Asia correspondent for Guardian, for Forbes at the time, and then writing a lot of kind of feature articles. And I thought, okay, well, that's great. And then I came across this scholar from University of Ottawa. Her name is Heather Morrison. And she wrote about these publishing figures of what comes out of academic scopes, broadly speaking, for publishing, and pays profit-driven companies. $25 billion, she said, in a blog online that nobody really found, that I just, through my Googling prowess, happened to stumble upon as a journalist looking for something interesting to cover. I said, that can't be right. $25 billion comes out of higher education for publishing broadly. That's not research journals. Research journals is $10 billion. $25 billion is the larger publishing market. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Profit margins, 30, 35, 40%, higher than Google, higher than Apple, Facebook. That's interesting. And so I started to write about this. It was interesting. I'm good at finding people on the internet and emailing them, and everybody wants to talk. That's a human virtue. And so I started to do this kind of undercover work as a journalist, trying to tell this story of research publishing. And the more I told it, the more I saw a global starvation for this content. As I would write these pieces, the pieces that I did towards academic publishing and open access were some of my most widely read pieces. I'm talking like 400,000 reads on one of my Huffington Post pieces. I did a piece on Medium that I submitted, and that got like 250,000 reads, and there's no real amplification except self-amplification on social media. Don't those little keywords go into this digital literacy kind of conference? How we can leverage these things to the scope of academics and to unite academics and find a collective voice. So I knew I hit on something. I knew I was kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies, and I found the well of oil that was shooting out. So I was like, damn, there's something pretty powerful here that is starvation from a global context. Because those retweets and stuff, that was when you did your Twitter analytics, analytics.twitter.com, you'd see that it was really on the global south, really shared the heck out of this. So I knew early on, I had an unfair advantage. I knew this was going to be kind of big, because I just saw from the journalistic side how it worked. So that was the beginning. That was the beginning of a path. And from there, I spent a good amount of time thinking, well, how do I do this? And how can I, as an academic, afford to do this? So I applied because I had some of the journalistic opportunities, I applied for a small grant through Open Society Foundation and got that. And I have great media students, and so we could do it for a bare bones budget. And I was off, starting a project and starting to kind of, figure out what this thing, which was eventually become this film, was about and what it was like. And so we interviewed tons of people. We traveled 45,000 miles and interviewed 75 leaders around open access and publishing and academics. And I started to get a little bit more clout in the open access conversations, not because I earned it, but because that was sort of the feedback loop. I was talking to people that were really thinking about it, and I was kind of pontificating, but again, in my brand of pontification, which is a little bit more sentiment towards the public mass. And so now, not only was I writing about it, I was doing the film for it, but people were asking me to comment for other scholarly and journalistic articles that were going to be written about it. So I'd always give these figures to the journalist, as they would call, and then I'm thinking of 4 specific occasions. I would talk about the figures and talk about how lopsided the power differential is in academic publishing. And then the biggest publishers, who we'll talk about in a little bit, would always reach out to the journalist that quoted me and say they want to defend their notion and say that Jason Schmitt has no idea of the profit margins. And they had the budget to do so, and almost like hand sterilization. They didn't want that subversive voice talking about the system. I mean, that's kind of standard, powers, subservient power kind of relationships there. They wanted to sterilize that kind of, they had the budget and the wherewithal to try to remove those that questioned power authority. And I thought, as a journalist, gosh, you couldn't give me something that wants to light my fire more. You're trying to sanitize me, and now I'm realizing, okay, there's even more power here than perhaps what I envisioned. So I kind of brought that into this project as well, trying to uncover this again for public sentiment, public kind of analyses. And as I started talking more and more about open access, which we'll define a little bit clearer in a little bit, but as I started talking about that, I realized there's so much infighting. Everybody that's around publishing, oh, don't talk to them. They don't know what they're talking about. Oh, we're an open advocacy organization, but don't listen to them. They have the wrong funders. Oh, no, don't. It was a huge, just messy kind of, system that talk about complex. And that's not even bringing, there's all these hierarchies of real open access. Is it gold open access? Is it green? Is it silver? Is it platinum? That sounds more like Tiffany's showrooms than any discernible way, in my mind, to really have like a general populace understand it. So it's complex. There's no narrative. Everybody's infighting. You have to figure out some way to pull this through and make a discernible, kind of a discernible narrative and storyline. And so, that's what I tried to do. And like you, I wanted to impact though. I don't want to, after I spend all this work and time literally sitting in my 10 by 10 research office thinking, is anybody on planet Earth going to see this? Is this horrible? Is this good? You have no idea. And after you watch something like 100 times in a row, you can't even really get a sense of the storyline anymore. It just like, is. So I'm sitting there working on it thinking, well, is this going to have an impact? Well, I can game the system a little bit. Because I know that if people can read it, that gives it a little bit of, if people can read it, if people can watch it, that might make it a little bit more advantageous to be shared. So I'm no dummy. I want to make sure that I have, from my New York area, CC BY 4.0 associated with my film. I want to make sure that people that are out there in the world can access it and see it. And so we did that. We did the CC BY 4.0, which means anybody can share it and read it and watch it. And I think that really helped it to diffuse. We had 360 some, these are all public screens, from the United Nations, NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, every Ivy League university. I've been in 10 countries in the last, I think, 3 months. But again, not because I did good, but because the world starved for this and nobody else is doing this. I'm not doing anything crazily smart. I'm just showing a mirror to the academics, and everybody is gasping and can't believe the ugly picture that they're seeing back. So I have, in my academic path, seen benefits of new media, benefits of video over Times New Roman. And I think that's something to take into digital literacy concerns. Absolutely. I think that that's something to take as we go as academics and try to make an impact on the world. And the academic scope isn't really set for this. My H index at Paywall it comes in as a 1. It shows 1 citation. I've had reviews in Nature and Science and Lancet and all in Wired magazine and all these lots of reviews and lots of recent scholarly journals that have done assessments of it, and the H index doesn't show, but this is a video. We're in this, isn't that interesting? We're at this kind of turbulent time of what is scholarship and what counts as scholarship. Does scholarship really just have to be Times New Roman? Does scholarship really just have to be capped? Does scholarship really just have to be perpetuated by companies? I just know, it became sort of a grassroots thing. People wanted to take up my cause for me, that the map that I showed you before, I think people appreciate the CC BY 4.0 nature, so they want to help. They did that map for me. That's a researcher out of Berlin. He said, I'm really behind this project. People went right this. I think this is the gate at Princeton. Somebody put this flyer up there. It sort of got its own kind of crowd behind it, which again is what social does so well. If it's shareable, if it's amplifiable, if it resonates with people. As I'm talking about this, I really want you to, again, like I tell my students, think of 5-year plans for your own academic journey and what's amplifiable for that. And where can you broaden your breadth of academic kind of pursuit to, again, maybe inform who we want to inform. So I know we're going to show the film a little later, but I thought at this point, this would be good to show. Maybe this is also digital savvy. You have to do lots of little trailers and lots of little sliders, and digital can't be stagnant, one camera, and all these. And that's that's literacy actually. That's not video production as we think of it in like film. That's digital literacy in my mind. So here's a short little minute clip that we made for the film, just to kind of early on showcase what we're doing.
The music business was killed by Napster. Movie theaters were derailed by digital streaming. Magazines are in crisis mode. Yet in this digital information Wild West, academic journals and the prestigious publishers who own them, like Elsevier, are posting higher profits than nearly any corporation. And this profit has an implication. It limits the amount of individuals around the globe who can solve the world's most complex problems, and that affects us all. I'm Jason Schmitt, and we're setting off to uncover the often hidden world of academic publishing.
We want to see the results of what we fund have impact in the real world.
When large portions of the population don't have access to research, the odds of us solving big problems are significantly lower.
The real case is, do we want innovation or do we not want innovation? And I think there is an obvious case for openness to unlock innovation.
Elsevier is a pain in the neck for us in Africa.
The scholarly publishing industry makes about a 35 to 40% profit margin. Wealth management industry is around 21%, Toyota's around 12%, Walmart's making around 3%, and Walmart is like this evil, giant for a lot of people, but it's 3% compared to 35%.
I've honestly never heard of corporations that have profit margins that are that big.
It's ridiculous sometimes when you try to access a paper that was written in 1975 and it's still behind a paywall. It doesn't make any sense.
In 1995, Forbes magazine wrote about the up-and-coming internet revolution and said that it was sure to derail one thing quickest, and that was academic journals. In that same article, it said, no Hollywood, no need to worry, music business is solid, academic journals, because academics are progressive and really kind of take to new technologies perhaps quicker than the average society member. It was academic journals that was going to be the first titan to fall. That was in 1995, that was kind of 1.0 internet, that was dial-up. Welcome to, that was the earliest iteration, but they saw the virtue of that early on. Ironically, that couldn't be further from the truth. Historically, if we look from 95 to now, we see the actual inverse. Every fabric of commerce has been really disrupted, almost except academic publishing. Well, it's been slightly altered. It's the opposite. Here's our 95. Actually, when Forbes magazine wrote that article, within a week, the Elsevier stock had dropped 10%. And it was a short-term gain of a Forbes article, and eventually. So the internet takes off. Digital dissemination takes off. The ability to share content takes off where there is no extra cost for me to share one piece of a journal digitally or to the planet Earth. Zero extra cost, 0.0000. There's the same cost margins of digital dissemination. When that happens, right around mid-2000s, you can really see the profit margins of the largest publishers shoot through the roof. Now, up until then, journal publishing was actually a costly endeavor, and there was a lot of credibility. And when it was, you took those journals and you pressed them and bound them and put them in an envelope and sent them to the library, and libraries opened that envelope and owned it and put it on the shelf for perpetuity. That was a really strong system. That there was a lot of costs associated with that. Then we go to a digital dissemination model, and we actually eventually throw all those old journals in the garbage. And we now have a system that's more indicative of cable television plugging into journal content as opposed to owning it in perpetuity on a shelf. And that changes the game dramatically. And this is Elsevier's profit through, in their science, technology, and medicine divisions. And, I find that slightly interesting. Draw your own conclusions. Profit has to exist in a scarcity model, or it exists best in a scarcity-driven model. I can have this, you can't have this. So for scarcity to work, I can't share what I have with you, even if there's no extra net costs. So we have, as we've seen, this is one of many, at least tens, if not hundreds, in the last several months. We've seen a lot of scholars do without content, because if a negotiation can't be reached, in Peru or in Taiwan, Netherlands, and Germany, then no content for you. And that has problems. That has problems for the fabric of what we are as scholars. How we do our services. But I've experienced this before. My first job out of university, as an undergrad, University of Michigan, I got a job as a low-level clerk at Atlantic Records. I worked in the distributing office, and I liked it because it sounded like a good job. It never was a good job, but people thought, oh, it's Atlantic Records. And that was in 2000, and that's when the new service that most of you have not heard about because you're a little too young, just a little bit, was coming out, and that was called Napster. And what Napster was a torrent that allowed anybody to share these brand new files that were called MP3s, that were new, and they were compressed, and they never sounded as good as the CDs that we had in Atlantic Records. Literally, this is a story that I vividly remember as sitting inside Atlantic Record headquarters, all of us low underling kind of employees, and we'd go to Napster with the brand new release songs. They'd always be on there for free to download. And we'd download them inside Atlantic Records, and we'd listen to them while we also would play the CD. And we'd always say, oh gosh, that CD quality is so much better than the MP3. We have nothing to worry about. Our business model is secure. A year later, all of us low underlings were let go because the whole business was massively disrupted in a year. And that's had ramifications as I've assessed academic publishing and digital content sharing, and the understanding of kind of, the sharing of time and space. So it's something that I've kind of brought with this journey as well. I like analogies. I think I understand life best through analogies. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and when I think of internets and the ability of this massive system, I look at where else can we see something that is revolutionary to the whole core of fabric of society in North America? And one of those places to me is the advent of the Model T. Not just because it enabled traffic and it enabled actual travel, but it enabled a whole host of new businesses. All of a sudden, gas stations and freeways and hotels and byways and regional shopping and national, kind of grid transportation routes. All because of this one thing, which was created which was mass-produced in 1909 by Henry Ford. It was created years before. 1909, this vehicle came out. Now that was it's more like a tractor. I mean, this is like wood-spoked wheels, and to start it, you have to actually go outside here, and there's a handle you have to spin to get the engine to turn over, and it runs more like a tractor, and it has no windshield wipers, and it's no heater, no air conditioning, right? No blinking lights. But it started something. Now, that was 1909. By 1919, a decade later, Henry Ford was asked if he's ever going to evolve this, because it was the same vehicle, hadn't really progressed at all in that first decade. And he said, no, we're going to stay with this, and the famous quote is, you can get this in any color you want as long as it's black. Meaning he's not going to appeal to the masses, he's not going to give you red or brown or any other color that you might want for this, he's sticking to his guns. And I feel like there's something as we look at the internet with this. So, we talked about 1995 internet, and that was a very kind of one-way street. Internet information, zeros and ones, was delivered this direction only. Web 2.0, the predictive internet, changed things a little bit. They said, if you look on like Wikipedia or a site, it says Web 2.0 was created in 2006. But real predictive internet, the ability to deliver content from Amazon, to actually start to utilize Facebook and Amazon and YouTube, really started to have function and functionality in 2008. That's when a lot of the early adapters in those platforms started to develop. So if you're buying what that's selling, 2008 to where we are now, we're just about a decade into our journey in digital. We're where Henry Ford was when he said you can only get this vehicle still in black. We think we figured everything out. We think we know what life is going to be like for the long haul. We don't even cognitively think about the fact that there's Moore's Law, where technology and transistors are doubling their power nearly every 2 years. Moore's Law says it's 2 years, it's a little less. It's actually more close to like 1.8 years right now is the doubling of transistor power. So things are evolving massively quick, and we're still at the infancy. Why is this important? Because I think this is darn important for these conversations of access, because these conversations aren't just at this one point in time. We're making choices that's going to presumably affect humanity and access to like the most important things of science to help us and clean energy and health and cancer for the long haul. This isn't something like just trivial. And this moment is massively important, and we're still at that infancy. We need to, I think we need to take that with us, and again, sort of understand that as we start to, put our chess pieces on the board and understand how to play this game. I'm not interested in the 1919 Model T that looks the same. I'm interested in the 1952 Ford Thunderbird, because that was the first car that had an AM/FM radio, that had windshield wipers, that had an automatic transmission, that was almost like our modern car. I don't think it's going to take from 1919 to 1952 for us to get there. I think we're going to get there in a matter of 5 to 7 years. Meaning these next 5 to 7 years are massively pivotal, more so than the automobile. And these conversations of how to empower digital around that and education around that, I want to talk about dancing. Chris Anderson, who is the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. He works with Joey Ito out of MIT Media Lab regularly. He did a piece in Wired in 2010. Remember we talked about 2008 was Web 2.0 really started to get its traction. So that's when Web 2.0 started to really work. Everybody started to really gravitate to these new social networks, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. I don't think Pinterest was out yet. And Chris Anderson started to understand this idea of crowd-accelerated innovation. Crowd-accelerated innovation, aka kind of synergy. He looked at dancers from Jamaica and dancers from Cleveland, Ohio. And history of dancing, if you were a dancer and you danced in Cleveland, Ohio, you danced among Cleveland's best. Jamaica, same thing. All of a sudden, because of YouTube, because of this new, this like synchronous kind of competition, this synchronous shareability, now you can share your dance moves amongst different regions in a similar time and space. So much so that now there is competition not just regionally, but globally. And what came from that was a dancing revolution and dancing quality that had never been seen on planet Earth. The dance moves shot up dramatically from both regions. You can see the analogy I'm going with here again. I think analogies are good. That's how my brain works and kind of processes things that are hard to kind of grasp. I like synergistic opportunities. I like 1 + 1 + 1 equaling 14 rather than 3. I think that's much more indicative to where we want to go as a human species. But synergy doesn't happen by the same minds, same side of minds, same pedigree, we need people from all sorts of different orientations solving those world's most complex problems. But we don't have that. We have the opposite. We have a massively Western division of research. In my film that you're going to watch later tonight, there's a quote that 40% of what's published in the New England Journal of Medicine is published within a 150-mile radius of Boston, Massachusetts. We have a massive ability to reach the world, but because of scarcity, which we talked about, because of the profit margins, those that have access are generally Western-based institutions. Western-based institutions are often having better access to Ebola and Zika and major pandemics than indigenous populations. I find that problematic. I find this Western ideal perpetuation problematic. But you know what? Nobody sees it because it's invisible, just like the students that aren't in my class. Nobody sees that. We just go through our day and we have access and we don't think about it and we go through and we publish and we research. And honestly, you know who thinks about it most are librarians. You know who doesn't think about this much is the faculty. I honestly, I feel like I'm a fairly good representation of telling you that right now because I've done quite a few of these and very few faculty members. Lots of research librarians. That's, again, it's a great audience here to at least, kind of get to have this opportunity to talk. We've signed up for this wholeheartedly understanding some of the shortcomings.
It's actually essential to academics' careers to publish in high-profile journals that are owned by academic publishers like Elsevier and Wiley and Nature Publishing and so on. It's important for them getting faculty positions, it's important for them getting promoted tenure and so on. And so the predicament that's really facing academics is that even though everybody basically recognizes the essential injustice of the system, they're trapped in this bind where they can't escape from it because their own academic culture kind of forces them into this servitude to their scholarly publishing overlords.
So, if we can't write the system ourselves, maybe somebody can do that for us. Welcome to what's called Plan S. It was created by Coalition S, a consortia of 16 of the top funders from Europe. That initially that was led by Robert Jan Smits, who is the head of Coalition S. He just took a presidential position at an Amsterdam University, and now is led by Mark Schultz. And what this says is that those 16 top funders from Europe are saying that anything that the lever in academics is where the money is. These funders are saying that anybody that accepts money from these initial 16, and now the new additions, needs to make that research available open access by 2020. It's a very short time frame. It's a lot of controversy. And there's been all sorts of new additions that have signed on. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with their $7.5 billion that they put towards science every year, have signed on saying anybody that accepts their money. Wellcome Trust, with their $2.3 billion of funding towards science, has said, we're signing on to this. It has a massive, powerful, and a massive ability to be powerful and to dictate the future directions of academics. But the largest publishers aren't going to go up lightly, and academic culture is slow to change. I know the largest publishers are kind of playing the same thing that my record labels played when Napster came out, trying to perpetuate a system which really serves them well, and funding opportunities to kind of, again, sterilize those conversations that would be dissonant. And so that's what we're massively seeing right now in the academic scope is a push towards open access in 2020 by Plan S, but it's getting a lot of controversy. Scholars are saying it limits their academic choice. It limits their academic freedoms. I kind of agree with them, but I think that academic freedoms, in some sense, shows our addiction to a certain system. And I think there's a good analogy, again, to cigarette smoking. If we are satisfied by the largest publishers and what they do for us, and their impact factors really make us just, kind of crave what their abilities can provide us, it's a hard time to break that habit. I've never met somebody in my life that quit smoking by doing it gradually. It's usually kind of a cold turkey, throw out everything at once. And so when I see people complain about academic freedom and say that we need more gradual rollout to open access, I say that open access is a concept started in 1991. There was this guy, Stephen Arnott, who wrote this paper called Subversive Proposal, calling for everything in scholarship to be open access. That's 1991. 2001, Budapest Open Initiative was founded by 15 of the largest leaders in academic research. That's 2001. If this isn't gradual rollout, it needs to happen quicker. And I feel that we're finally starting to make some progress by this. But again, you bump into these occurrences of what this means all over. And in filming this, I had a film crew that they're kind of car buffs, and maybe that showed with the Model T thing already. But so I was driving in the middle of Virginia with my film crew. One of my videographers really likes this brand new Ford car that just came out in 2017. It's called a Ford Focus RS. You don't care about it, but it goes 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. And it's really powerful and really rare. And so we're literally driving our van down a road in the middle of Virginia after filming somebody. And we passed a car dealer, and there out front sits a brand new blue Ford Focus RS. It was like candy for my video. They're like, no, you have to turn around, turn around, turn around. So, okay, you try to make everybody happy so you don't have infighting amongst your crew. So I turn the big old van around, we go back into the car dealer, we park at the car dealer, we walk out, and we're, drooling over this car, and the salesperson comes out, and he's like, oh, what are you guys doing? And you can tell we had some sort of, we had New York plates on for one thing, and said, okay, what are you guys doing? I'm doing a documentary. Oh, what's it on? It's on academic publishing. I know it's not the most exciting. No, I'm actually halfway through my PhD program. Really? Actually, I'm halfway through, but they just cut me off the system, so I don't have access to anything. I was like, literally the serendipity of life. I said, can we mic you up and shoot an interview with you in the brand new Ford Focus RS? I said, let's do it. So, you know, again, serendipity. But also showcasing who doesn't have access is often invisible outside of the university system. Would you mind maybe sitting in the driver's seat and I'll sit next to you in the passenger seat and we'll shoot them across there?
Yeah. You just shut the door and roll windows down, or you want me to just leave it?
So we're driving for our documentary. We're in the middle of Virginia, and we passed a Ford dealer, and we came across a Ford Focus RS, and we are hearing about the Ford Focus RS, but we're also hearing about the academic world. And so you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Dwight Parker. In the middle of my working on a PhD in ed psychology, I decided I need to take a break from that, and I'm so glad.
Yeah, and so you're working on your PhD, Dwight, and have you ever hit a paywall?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely a paywall. Especially after, while I was in the program, I had access to lots of things, but once you're outside of that program, those same resources just aren't available to you, at least they weren't to me anyway.
You know, do you think there's a problem with academic research publishing?
Absolutely. Especially in education psychology mind, and most of the research done is government funded, so it's taxpayer money going to fund research that they're then charging for.
I love that.
It's absurd. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, Sci-Hub gave me the option that I just didn't have to pay the money to do that. I need to be able to access that research regardless. And I don't have $79.99 to do that. Not selling cars.
We hear the engine rev a little bit?
I'm sorry.
You're making a documentary or an academic publishing, anything you can do that's exciting. I'm like, all right.
The F-150s all day long, baby. This is Culpeper.
So, would you mind maybe sitting in the driver's seat? If we think that something is not opportune for all of society, we need collective action, we need collective voice. And I've seen recently in my life, this came out last week. They did a review of our film in an Elsevier journal called Endeavor. It was done by Eileen Fife. She's the head librarian of St. Andrews. And she, said the irony of her review on an open access film that was cost $19.95 to access online through Elsevier's site. And that tweet went pretty viral. Hers, and there were several other, there's probably about several hundred retweets of this. And this is the editor of said journal that opened it up in perpetuity because of the irony of the situation. My point being that I love seeing little germs of success when collective action actually has discernible change associated with it. But that's small beans. This is bigger. University of California, the UC system, as most people are aware, have recently said enough. They took for one thing, I've been saying that I've been on the United States of America apology tour with academics because I say how slow our higher education system has been, 5,300 institutions, to adapt anything open access. Finally, within the last month, something has changed. The UC system has said that they are no longer going to support funding of Elsevier contracts, and the 5 people that were on the task force, Jeff Mason, who's the dean, Ivy Anderson, Gunter Wolvold, Dennis Ventry, and Mackenzie Smith, were on the task force to negotiate with Elsevier, and they came to the conclusion that there was no contract possible. They did away, like many other nations have done, away with Elsevier contracts. And that got a lot of ink. This is in the Atlantic. But the amount of interest has sparked other kind of following suit. The state of California just recently passed a bill that anything that's funded through the state of California must be made open access within a 1-year embargo. Year embargoes aren't my favorite because usually that first year is the hot period for any research, but regardless, at least it's getting open and out. The U.S. government also just signed a a form saying, or a bill saying that anything that's not confidential within the U.S. government is made open. So the default for the government now is open as opposed to closed. That doesn't seem like much when you talk about the amount of breadth of information that large governments contain. That actually is a discernible change for society. So we're seeing things start to fall in favor. But how do you make this? How do you make these wins palatable or understandable for general faculty? I don't know. This is what UC system is using as their handout for faculty that might be concerned that they no longer have Elsevier access. The highest impact journals often are referenced as CNS disease, cell, nature, and science disease. Those biggest journals have the highest impact factors, and they're the aspirational journals for junior faculty members. And this is where I need to make a delineation. All of my rants up to this point about open access are true and vested in who I am, but I don't want to perpetuate people to only publish open access as junior faculty until the system is in place for them not to be punished or not to be awarded as highly. I think that's a really important delineation. So anybody that has tenure and past, I think has no right to continue the system. But as we're trying to make academic careers as junior researchers and scholars, I don't want to sound, like I'm trying to lead anybody astray. But so this is the playbook for the UC system, the largest college system in the country. Telling people to install browser plugins and unpaywall is a great option. Using Google Scholar more diligently, using PubMed Central, contacting librarians so that they can look at other pathways to actually get through and find other e-links that are subscribed to the library, and the good old-fashioned contacting the author, which has like a 95.5% success rate, ResearchGate also, and this is not big enough for you to see, but it says, note, the UC libraries do not endorse using Sci-Hub for article assessing. Sci-Hub is an illegal torrent, very similar to what I said was Napster, but allows access to any research article published on planet Earth for free. And that is Sci-Hub.tw, I believe is the actual, the signage at this point. But it is a force that has created an illegal capacity. Sci-Hub in 2017, as I interviewed Alexander Albakian, the creator of it, had 150 million downloads taking place in 2017. You can see China led the way, India, USA, Brazil, France. This system isn't just being used by those that don't have access. It's actually highlighting another problem, which is a user experience problem. In the United States, again, it's where I can speak because I'm the most knowledgeable, one of the main sources of download activities on the East Coast is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which has some of the most privileged, educational-oriented people. Meaning that if you have to go into your library database, especially if you're at home, validate your IP address, go through the research journal, validate again, that's very cumbersome. That's true. I can go on Sci-Hub, type in one thing, boom. Even if I have access. So this system is providing a crutch. Is it a long-term solution of illegal activity? No. Was Napster a long-term solution of illegal torrent files sharing of music? No. What did Napster give us? I have Spotify, I have Pandora, I have Amazon Music. It gives me any song on planet Earth on my phone legally. You need that moment of kind of assessing everything, where everything's a little bit kind of hazy and figuring it out. And it's not always, to the lawyer's purview early on. But this crutch, very similar to the music industry, creates an opportunity for us to move forward. What can you do on the near term? That's maybe not quite so radical, but at least showcases some movement towards understanding your own rights as a scholar, understanding your own rights as your research is shared. A great site is Author Alliance. It helps to understand your rights as a researcher. Another one is the Sherpa Roma. It allows you to look at the copyright agreements of all publishers, both in current signing as well as the historical catalog. Many scholars have signed their copyright away to journals only to not know that they actually are entitled to those rights in a 2019 vantage point. You can best bet that's not going to be made public through the publications themselves. There's an open research funders group that's a strong advocacy, and I really encourage funders, philanthropy, to join that. And also, just understanding that you should be requesting access to this. Requesting it from librarians both in the university. I was in Iceland, and the public library in Iceland is affiliated with the University of Iceland, so any resident in Iceland gets access to all the research journals that all the universities subscribe to. I was actually kind of floored by that. So Iceland is like this crazy little island amongst itself where everybody actually does have access. I wrote about this, and I did a piece in Guardian here, I think 2 weeks ago. And as I was writing about this and talking, I did my kind of spiel of how open access is crazy and needs to be broken. And Sci-Hub, as I kind of ran through, there's this fairly famous open source scholar from MIT, Harvard trained, Richard Stallman. He was a major competitor early on with Steve Jobs, and he's massive into open source software now. And he specifically criticized what I'm showing you. He said this is such an, so I'm at least paying him homage to say, he said this is selling out, this is not radical. He says you can do better than this. You shouldn't even show people this because this isn't strong enough. He says we need to break the system completely. And I like that notion, and I do like breaking things completely, but he was maybe, he wanted to see the film, and I sent it to him, and he couldn't see it because he refuses to use Java, because Java is proprietary, so I had to send him a different film that didn't use Java. So is that actually, not to make fun of it, but is that the way forward? I don't know. But this is exciting, so what do you do with all that extra cash if you're the UC system right now? You got money. Hey, I like DOAJ. DOAJ is a directory of open access journals. It credentializes, I don't think that's a word, any sort of open access journal and gives it the credibility and merit it either deserves or doesn't deserve. What this is DOAJ now is backed by Plan S. Plan S says that if you're going to publish open access, that journal has to be endorsed by the Directory of Open Access Journals. The director of this, Lars Bjornhausen, is a great friend in the film as well. But so this is, all of a sudden, it massively ratcheted up in credibility and global entry, because now this is like the accreditation body of open access. And so what do you do if you're the UC system? Well, you give them 90,000 pounds and say, keep up the good work. Because you got a lot of $100,000 bills to throw around when you just save $10 million a year. You can really support things that are powerful. And maybe even give some more student services. So I hope that we can support a system that's more inclusive than exclusive. I hope we can support a system that is not driven on scarcity, but driven on abundance. I hope we can support a system that is the exact innate virtues that all academics share. We all want this. There is just a select few publishers that don't want this. Every single university knows. Every single university is aware of this. Every single university is also not aware of what the other universities are doing. As you're going to see later, we all sign non-disclosure agreements. We can't even tell what our university libraries are paying for this. This system is just idiotic. As young scholars, we at least need to be aware of this. We need to be aware of this journey and how to at least make best use of all the time and energy that we're putting forward to do these good causes. So my 5-year plan for academia is seeing us have our content solve the world's best problems, the world's biggest problems. And so that, I think, is a good 5-year goal for us all. Thank you.
So we have about 10 minutes for questions from the audience. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm writing an article with a friend of mine that is supported by the Open Access Fund from one of the universities, but we're planning to publish it in a Paywall journal, but pay them to open access.
That's called hybrid publishing.
Yeah, but isn't that like replicating the system? So many of these funds that support open access, we're still publishing in this Paywall. That's like paying them extra, like $5,000 per article to give like open access.
Yes.
So what?
Can I unpack that?
Yes. Please.
Hybrid journals. Your university pays $30,000 to subscribe to this journal. That's that's a scarcity driven, not everybody has access to this. You want to publish an article, they say it's the hybrid journal. If you publish in it, you can open that one journal article, not the whole journal, not all the other subsequent articles, just your one article, can be opened in that journal, that hybrid journal, for a fee. $5,000 is a very realistic, like normal fee on top. That's to open it. Talk about, again, the best profit margin on planet Earth. The publisher then is taking that $5,000 and still charging all the other universities the same exact price. So that $5,000 has no extra net, there's no cost associated with that whatsoever. So that's pure profit that's driven into the hybrid journal. Plan S has a rollout feature of saying that anything that's published in hybrid open access can happen for just 1 year, and there has to be a transition plan away from hybrid journals. And that is really powerful that, again, I don't want to direct your career and say, don't do that, but that's a really problematic profit-inducing kind of phenomenon that really taints the market right now.
So what's the value of these type of supports?
The value is everybody can read it, and all of a sudden it's going to be a bigger impact for you as a scholar.
Right, but it's not actually addressing the issue.
It doesn't address it at all. I mean, it still keeps the power held by those that currently hold the power. And so that's a really complex notion.
Sorry. I mean, besides that specific scenario, there must be other practices that you must have seen. I mean, because whether we like it or not, the notion, the general notion of open access has been used to perpetuate other kind of practices that are fairly common now and are seen as, good just because it has kind of like a stamp of open access, and they are really not. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what other practice can you mention?
First thing that comes to mind is flipping journals completely. So the editorial body of Lingua, which is a linguistic journal, shifted. The whole editorial body, again, this is in the film that you'll watch later, has said that they want to make their journal flip from Elsevier and make it open access. So I think it was 30-some editors and the editor-in-chief that all kind of, met in secrecy and said, we're the quality of this journal. It's not the editor. It's not the publisher. The publisher has no credibility whatsoever. It's the whole editorial body and the peer review. That's 100% the credibility. So if you take that whole entity itself and move it to an open access, there's no change in the prestige, the cachet that's associated with that, and instantly that becomes synonymous in that discipline as the credible source. So that's what happened with the lingua glossa. So once the editorial body of Lingua left and went to glossa, Elsevier was left with this large hole in their roster, so they created a new lingua that was against it. Everybody in the actual scholarly society said, don't you dare write for new lingua, and they now refer to it as zombie lingua. Or if any journals actually still do the tangible journal that's in the library, scholars will go and write zombie, and they share it always on social media, zombie lingua, to denote that this is not something that the society actually, or the discipline actually endorses. So that's one, and MIT Press, Journal of Infomedics, just did that here, I think about a month and a half ago. That whole editorial body shifted from, again, Elsevier to, they're hosted through the MIT Press now. So that's one kind of activation point that I think is great. But then there's a whole other notion that this gets more like kind of almost the rogue, what I was ending with Richard Stallman. I mean, you can kind of break apart the system. Do we need journals in their kind of classic in its siloed pattern, or can you break that up more? And there's sites like archive.org, which has been huge in physics and math and science since the early 90s, and has really helped those those disciplines to always have open access, or open is the default for those disciplines. So there's ways to, I think, learn there. Lastly, I think that the thing is critical is being able to deposit your article before you publish it in a preprint that's hosted hopefully by your university. Preprints are never in contrast to the copyright you would sign, because they're never the final polished glossy article that would be published in that journal. They're just the actual writing itself, and it's the quality writing, but it's not the final version that would come out in the journal itself. So depositing that preprint at least allows people in the world to access 99.9% of what that content would have been about. So I think those are some of them that come to the top of my mind.
This is just fantastic and really exciting work, so thank you very much. Super inspiring. You made the analogy with Spotify, and I just wonder, that seems problematic that the profit is, you know, when artists are losing out. And
That's good.
so, and this Sci-Hub thing is interesting. You say that we need a legal way to do this, but the legal way just puts the profit then into some. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, the delineation of musicians and academics are very different. Academics make their sole or a good portion of their profit on their, or at least they did, on their albums, where then it became the songs, but mainly then they made it on touring because that didn't become a strong revenue stream. That's different than if we had a user kind of interface like Sci-Hub. Again, the academics are not ever making financial gains on this research. That's also what contributes to this massive profitability. We do the research for free, we edit for free, we deliver it for free, and then we buy it back at high profits. But the point of that is, from the academic scope, this would actually be a lot easier to palette from an academic pedigree rather than a musician pedigree, because our compensation comes from our institution rather than our creative endeavor itself. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I realize there's a lot of complexities there, though, that it still doesn't unpack the legal nature of it.
Thank you so much. That was so great. I did have a question. So, you're talking about how we can go moving forward. How are you going moving forward at Clarkson University with this?
Well, I'm focused on sort of reproducibility crisis in science now. Just started that, so that's sort of my new direction. I shouldn't just downplay what Clarkson University has done. I have a president that was massively supportive. I showed this film to my film crew, my wife and daughter, and then my university president in that order. And I think that was really indicative of a president that really supported this early on, because he sees the costs that are associated with that. And he gave me a course release this semester as well, so I could do this travel. And he's been, so I feel like I've had a really great kind of support network to allow this to happen and to run with it. I'm very active on continuing the open access conversations on Twitter and speaking out on it, and I'll keep doing journalism on it, but Paywall 2 doesn't sound that exciting for me right now to make, nor does it actually, has it progressed that much in the last year and a half since I stopped. So I'm focused now in kind of my next pursuits is, again, as a journalist and then eventually a film, but on reproducibility crisis in science.
And so I guess I'm asking, as at the university, because you said that at the University of California, they shut that down and now they're being open. So
Yes.
how can we get something like that started?
That's a great point. I've been really advocating for my specific number 2 university structure that should fall is the SUNY system, the State University of New York system. It's very similar to the California system in size and breadth. And they also happen to be renegotiating their Elsevier contract this year. So I've been in contact with their head of libraries and trying to kind of make as much dust. I keep tweeting at all the SUNY libraries, questioning how their contract, again, just kind of a little subversive. And not necessarily, I think they like it. Like they brought me, they have me kind of, I'm going to go do some talks for their faculty and stuff. They like me kind of poking fun at them. So I'm trying to at least target those biggest titans to fall. The University of North Carolina recently said that they're also going to follow suit to what the UC system has done. So we're seeing more universities actually start to follow into the mix. So that's good. That's why I'm vested in specifically one institution at this moment.
Thank you, that's an amazing talk. Are there some journals where you can make available your work publicly, freely, after, say, a year of publication? Or 2 or 3, I'm not quite sure. If they do exist, is there some place where we can find out who those journals are and how we can access them?
Directory of Open Access Journals, the DOAJ says what the protocol is for the journals. So I think that if you spend time looking at your discipline output on DOAJ, you can at least understand what journals, and some years would have that 1 year embargo. They don't usually go 2 years. It's usually either 1 year, 6 months, or no embargo on those periods. But that would be, I think, a strong starting source that I would go to, DOAJ.org. Yeah.
This might be the last question. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious in your travels if you've seen, alongside the work you're doing, folks that are working on making things
scholarly that were typically not considered scholarly, and different kinds of versions of peer review. So for instance, I'm thinking about, I don't know if you've heard of it, Wilfrid Laurier Press, which is Wilfrid Laurier's university here in Canada. They're experimenting with doing some open access and peer review podcasting projects. So one of my favorite podcasts is Secret Feminist Agenda, which is recorded here in Vancouver. It's actually a peer reviewed podcast that is scholarly and open, obviously open access because it's a podcast. So I find projects like that really exciting, sort of like finding ways in which to invest academic capital into things other than the paper. So I'm just curious in your travels if you've seen other examples of this kind of work happening.
Look how this plays into the millennial generation too as well. So when we're broadening the breadth of what we can deliver as scholars and the credibility of those outlets. Yeah, I mean, I think that I've seen also the profitability of open. MIT Press, their open educational resources, specifically their open textbooks, their most profitable open textbook that's freely available to anybody is also their most profitable open textbook because it's an 800-page glossy, and once the students buy it for $14, or once they see it online for $14, once they see it for free and they see the price point of $14, they say, I'm just going to buy this because that's. So I'm seeing that as a way to actually, brand and share content broader as well. That's really exciting about podcasts now. And I think that's something I think we need to think about is kind of, academics of how we do this and how it's monitored and how it's shared in capacities for tenure review. Again, like the H-index is my own kind of column right now. I feel like I should have a decent H-index for this because, and I don't. And how do we allow scholars to get valuable, merit off of something like this, rather than just, luckily somebody likes it and says, oh, it's okay, we'll give you 10.
Right. Like there's one scholar, just to share quickly one thing that fascinated me, that was on a podcast episode talking about how on her syllabus, she's a professor, she assigned a reading of a Twitter thread of someone unpacking and doing like a feminist analysis of the movie Moana, and that instead of a reading, like an article, it became like, look at this is scholarly. Yeah. And so that I'm really interested
Those
in
Twitter
thinking about how we
great.
can, and find other scholarly work in places other than the journal.
And the last thing on Twitter is I would really advocate anybody that's coming up into academics to really start being active in Twitter. I feel like that's the real neural network that scholars can really kind of share within a discipline, and it coordinates a discipline through a organization that's different than the society or the main kind of source. I feel like that's a really strong thing that's never really existed until now. And I would really just encourage everybody to probably take part in that as your career evolves moving forward. Thank you.
Now let's give